All right, coming to you live from inside a volcano. It's the Movie Change Up podcast. As always, I'm your host, Joe Fricke, and if you didn't see our preview, it's James Bond month, so we're going to be doing a little James Bond talk here today, and this is our Mount Rushmore episode where we'll be breaking down various components of Bond and giving our kind of Mount Rushmore of what those categories are. If you're not sure what it means to be like a list of Mount Rushmore, it doesn't necessarily mean the top four. It just means these four that we think represent the various things we would like to represent. And our categories today are Bond songs, henchmen, worst moments, best moments, Bond girls, cold opens, and finally villains. And if you're curious why we didn't just do our Mount Rushmore of Bonds, it's because it's kind of self-explanatory. We'd pick probably Connery, Moore because he was in the most, Daniel Craig because he's the current and most popular one, and then it's just kind of, okay, which one don't we include? Is it Brosnan, is it Lazenby, or is it Timothy Dalton? So there really just didn't really feel like much of an interesting discussion in a Mount Rushmore of Bond. But before we get to it, let me introduce my co-hosts. First off, we got Johnny Doop. You're far and away the biggest Bond fan of the three of us. So, kind of, what were your thoughts coming into this?
I'm excited. I'm a little obsessed with this franchise. So obviously, this month I've been looking forward to since we started planning it. And this was an episode I was excited to get to because last week was a fun discussion for anyone who checked it out of us spinning the wheel and talking about random topics. But I like going into this knowing the conversations that we will be had and characters or moments that we didn't mention last week or get into detail that we get to really delve into today. And I know my favorite stuff from the series, so I'm very interested to see as like a lifelong Bond fan compared to two newer Bond fans. I want to see kind of how those opinions differ, looking at villains and songs and cold opens and things like that. I think that'll be fun.
All right, and so I finished up my watch of all 24 Bond movies today. I started a couple weeks ago. I think the only one I had ever seen was Doctor No, so I decided, you know what, we're doing Bond month here at Movie Change Up. It's about time I watch every single Bond movie. And today, I watched Die Another Day and A View to a Kill. So Tristan, I know you kind of weren't really much of a Bond fan either. I don't know if you'd really seen any of them, and so you started this watch through as well. How's your watch through coming? Did you finish? And what's your thoughts on today's Mount Rushmore?
Yeah, I'll say that before this marathon here, the only Bonds that I'd seen were Casino Royale, Quantum of Solace, and Spectre. So I was pretty much completely blind going into this, and I had a great time with it. I'm not quite done. I have, I think, 4 or 5 left on my lineup here, but I'm getting there, and I'm having a great time with it. I have a few of the more lower ranked ones left to go, so I'm curious how I'll feel about the ones that are more universally disliked. But I'm looking forward to this Mount Rushmore. I'm having a great time with the franchise. I've been kind of blown away by it, really. All of the movies I've watched so far have had at least moments or things worth talking about, so I'm curious what we'll be mentioning here, because I don't think it's all going to be like the top 5 most talked about Bond movies. I have a couple here that I think are slightly deeper cuts for stuff that I appreciated in other movies, so I'm excited to talk about all of that and more in this episode.
All right. And yeah, basically, as someone who didn't really have nostalgia and didn't really know what was popular and what was liked in the Bond movies before I started, I just kind of was able to pretty much form my own opinion on them as I watched them. I realized other people's rankings are bullshit, because there were times where things were ranked at the bottom, and I was like, how is that on the bottom? That's one of my favorites, or whether it's a song or, just a movie in general, or a henchman or a villain. So this will be really interesting and fun to talk about. And without further ado, let's get started. And we are kicking this off with Bond songs. And so my Mount Rushmore of Bond songs. First off, I have the song I was familiar with the most before I started, because I'm most familiar with the Guns N' Roses cover, and that is Live and Let Die by Paul McCartney and Wings. I think it's just a good, solid song. I think it stands alone outside of Bond, and it's kind of why I chose it. It was the one I knew before I started, like I said. Next up, we have Goldfinger by Shirley Bassey. I think it's kind of it wasn't obviously from the first Bond movie, but I think it's kind of the most iconic of the early Connery ones, so that's why I chose that one. Next up, we got the song I Can't Stand With a Passion, because if you listen to our last episode where I talked about when I worked at Dollar General, there was about 3 or 4 months where they decided to play the radio while we worked, and those 3 or 4 months was when Skyfall was all over the radio. So about every 3 or 4 songs, the song would come on, and it would, just through Pavlov's response of working at Dollar General, it made me hate this song, but I still had to pick it, and that's Adele's version of Skyfall. And then finally, in my fourth slot, I didn't want to pick Shirley Bassey again. I wanted to have a little bit more representation, so I decided to go with "Nobody Does It Better" by Carly Simon from The Spy Who Loved Me. And those are my 4 picks: "Live and Let Die," "Goldfinger," "Skyfall," and "Nobody Does It Better." And so,
right.
Johnny, what is your Mount Rushmore?
I like those picks a lot. I agree with most of them, so I'll get to those first. I have Goldfinger. I think that's one of the most, if not the most iconic Bond song outside of Bond's original theme, which, by the way, we are not including for this list if we didn't mention that, because we already did an episode on just character themes in general, and we had the Bond theme, so obviously that would make under Bond songs. But Goldfinger, just you get the nice brassy sound, strong female voice, just really iconic song. Just great overall. Nothing really else to say about it. I also have Skyfall. It was the first Bond song to win an Oscar. I think that's important for doing like a Mount Rushmore. And it's the best of like the modern Bond songs. Probably the best we've had since the 80s, because we didn't get any good ones really for the Brosnan films. And I think it's easily my favorite from the Daniel Craig movies.
Not the one
and
from
then
Quantum
I agree.
Solace?
No, not the worst song in the history of Bond. But I also have "Nobody Does It Better" from "The Spy Who Loved Me" by the great Carly Simon. Lyrically, it's the best Bond song because it just describes the character so well. And I like that it's a female point of view, basically talking about Bond. I really like when the songs kind of take on roles like that in it, and it's not just like blandly describing a villain or something like we mentioned with "The Man with the Golden Gun" last week in our other show. But I think that one is pretty universally loved. It's my personal favorite. And then where I differ from Joe, I wanted to go with one of the more kind of rock and roll ish Bond songs, but I didn't go "Live and Let Die" because I don't think that encapsulates the era quite as well as "A View to a Kill" by Duran Duran. It's not like one of my personal favorite Bond songs, but I think it was finally, as far as like the songs, they were getting Lulu and like people that were kind of past their prime and people that no one really cared about to do a lot of the songs. And Duran Duran was like the big act at the time. They were really popular, and this was the first Bond song that was like a #1 hit on Billboard. So I think that, just like the accomplishment with Skyfall being the first Oscar one, I don't think you can look past "A View to a Kill" of how popular it was at the time. And that's a big reason nowadays that they really try to get big artists with big names, and you get Billie Eilish for "No Time to Die," and you get Adele when she's big, because Duran Duran kind of really set that tone for it. So I think that deserves to be on the list, and that just slightly outdoes "Live and Let Die." Even though I prefer "Live and Let Die" as a song, I think just for the franchise itself, "A View to a Kill" is more iconic. So those are my 4.
I have 2 crossovers with each of you guys, so I'm going to go through those crossovers really quick first. Of course, I have Goldfinger. I think it's the iconic song of the Sean Connery era, and you see it referenced even in other eras of Bond. It's super known for the Sean Connery era. I also think it's just really effective. The brass and the way the motif kind of repeats. I mentioned this in the previous episode, but I think this is the most effective of the songs in the way that they use it throughout the movie. Like you see it throughout a couple scenes, you just get like that sting of the horns and things like that. It feels present throughout the movie. So I think that was really impressive with the use of Goldfinger and how much it was worked into the actual movie itself, and not just like, oh, here's the pop single for the movie and then move on. I also have "View to a Kill." I think this is probably my personal favorite of the Bond songs. I think it's like I think it fits Roger Moore's tone really well for his general run as Bond, especially with that movie. So I think it really sets you in like this fun kind of era of Bond where it's not a spy thriller type song. It's not one where you're taking the movie hyper seriously. It kind of just puts you in like this cool mood to relax and have a good time. And I think that's what Roger Moore's movies represent for me, is just having a good time with it. So that's my pick for that. And for me, the one that I think of course, Live and Let Die has gone beyond Bond, but I also think Diamonds Are Forever has gone beyond Bond. So that's my third pick, is Diamonds Are Forever. I've heard it sampled a ton in like rap music and hip hop music a lot, and it's kind of resonated through that culture. It's resonated in a lot of other music music genres, and the movie itself isn't necessarily great, but I think it's worth noting to see like a bad Bond movie that also has randomly a great song as the choice. And my last one is an oddball pick, an odd job pick, if you would. It's not necessarily the greatest Bond song, but we're not saying best Bond songs. This is the Mount Rushmore, so I'm going with one that I think is iconically known as being the worst of the worst, and it's Madonna's "Die Another Day." I think everyone talks, "Oh, I love the Bond songs except for Madonna's one," and I think there's worse songs out there, but I think that's well known enough in the pop culture as like the bad Bond song that I wanted to throw it in there. The same way you'd put like Halle Berry's Catwoman on like a superhero Mount Rushmore. So like, here's the one that's the worst of the worst. So I'm throwing out some love to the bad ones for that one. That makes my 4 songs: A View to a Kill, Goldfinger, Diamonds Are Forever, and Die Another Day.
All right. All right. Well, I've kept track of everyone's list, and it looks like we have four that have multiple. So only 4 that have multiple. So I can read those off. If we want to go with those 4, I already know what Johnny's vote is on that one, but we can go with those 4 because our 4 are Goldfinger, Skyfall, Nobody Does It Better, and A View to a Kill. Which is...
Yeah, that sounds about right. That's my list.
Sounds like Johnny knows his Bond,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if
I will say the other one I have on my list that I was hoping maybe one of you two snuck on so I could maybe fight for it. I just don't think it reaches iconic, but I think it might be the best. One of the best songs is the opening, the instrumental opening by John Barry of On Her Majesty's Secret Service, and like Tristan mentioned, that's used throughout the film, and I would like them, to maybe go back to just an instrumental one day, and do something cool with it and tie it into the score of the actual film like that movie did. I couldn't fight that over. I was originally had that on there, but I couldn't get over A View to a Kill was just such a popular song at the time. It was the first like huge Bond hit.
All right. So are we good with those 4?
I'm good with those. Sounds like a good mix of ours.
Right, yeah.
It's all Johnny's, of course, but
yeah, I mean, it's 3 of my 4, so I'm happy with it. Yeah, so so our show's Mount Rushmore of James Bond songs is Goldfinger from Goldfinger, Skyfall from Skyfall, Nobody Does It Better from whatever movie it was from,
The Spy Who Loved Me.
The Spy Who Loved Me, and A View to a Kill from A View to a Kill. I don't know why I had to say what movie they were from when really only one was different, but live shows, it'll happen.
I will say this. The thing about the A View to a Kill song is A View to a Kill is such a bizarre title. Like overall, like it doesn't really make sense. I wish they went with the other lyrics of the Duran Duran song for the title of the film and called it Dance Into the Fire. I think would have been a really cool Bond theme. And like, especially because you have him, you have the library, whatever they are, burned down with him in it and stuff. I think that would have been a really cool title for that movie. But real quick before we move on, I do want to shout out Tristan's picks of Diamonds Are Forever. I agree. That one was between that or Goldfinger as like the Shirley Bassey songs, but I went with Goldfinger just for the series is more iconic, even though Diamonds Are Forever might transcend past the series better. Like you mentioned with like modern day music and stuff. And then Die Another Day is definitely known as the worst of the worst, and you got to acknowledge the bad Bond songs in most cases. But in Mount Rushmore, I don't think you need to throw it up. But I respect Tristan's passion behind it.
All right,
for sure.
And look, if there's one thing that runs through Bond, it's that some of them are just bad, and that's kind of part of the charm of the franchise, at least for me.
Right.
And we do have a comment. Someone said Live and Let Die did spend 10 weeks on the chart, peaking at number 8. But if we want to go with chart toppers, then I think A View to a Kill at number 1 kind of takes that spot. So next up, our next category, we have Henchmen. And Johnny, do you want to kick that off?
Yeah, this is a tough one. So I'll start with the easy one. Odd Job from Goldfinger. He's arguably the most iconic. He kind of sets the standard for like the big tough guy exterior, like that you punch him and he doesn't react to it, like it doesn't hurt him, nothing hurts him. I love the bomb scene at the end just alone with Connery's Bond fighting Oddjob and the timer slowly ticking away is awesome, and his death is iconic with the hat getting electrified. I think is cool. I like when Bond has to do something out of the norm to take out a henchman because he can't just like shoot him or do anything like that. So I like that. My next three are maybe a little interesting or questionable, and I want to see if they're included in the other list. My personal favorite henchman is Knick Knack, so I got to throw him on there. We talked about this when we did Hall of Fame of like
Sidekicks or
villain
was
sidekicks.
Yeah, that's what it was.
And I think Knick Knack, rather than like the henchman, he makes such a great sidekick because his whole angle with Scaramanga is so different than anything else. He's there to try to get people to kill Scaramanga because then he gets everything, but he won't double cross him. He's loyal to him. I think that's a really cool angle, and I want to see stuff like that maybe expanded more in like future Bond films. So I like Knick Knack. He's very iconic. Hervé Villechaize is awesome. So I think he should be on there because he's also like him and Scaramanga are the only reason to even watch The Man with the Golden Gun.
Yep.
And then I went with one that might not make anyone else's list. I was debating on this and a more iconic character, but I'm going to go with Irma Bunt because I think she represents the female hench person. She is in On Her Majesty's Secret Service as Blofeld's like number two, basically, and she is the one who kills Bond's wife at the end. So I think that's a really iconic moment, and you got to go by, henchman. She doesn't die. She was successful in doing what she did. All the other henchmen either fail or die or whatever. She succeeds in her mission. I think that is important. And then my last one is someone that maybe didn't make the list if people don't consider him a henchman, but I do, and that is Red Grant from Russia with Love. You get Rosa Klebb as the main villain, and he's basically focused on as a more of a main character. But all in all, that's my favorite performance of any Bond villain or henchman from Robert Shaw. And it leads up to a moment we might talk about later in Best Bond moments with the train sequence. So I like that. And it was, Jaws. It was really, really hard to leave off this list.
No, I wasn't referring to the shirt because of Jaws. I was referring because he was in Jaws.
And Robert Shaw. Oh, well, that reminds me. I want to see. I'm guessing Jaws probably makes at least one of your lists, but I didn't have him on mine just because I felt like it was a little similar to Oddjob. And I think Oddjob kind of took the real strong henchman that Bond can't defeat type of guy off the list for me. So, I'm here for the argument, but I'm interested to see what you guys have. And definitely interested to see what Tristan considers to be the Mount Rushmore of Bond henchmen.
Yeah, there's layers to this shirt, okay? So
there's a lot of layers.
Tristan.
It's like an ogre, or an onion.
Yeah.
Like an onion and an ogre.
Yeah.
All right, so for my henchman, I have two crossovers with Johnny. I'll go over those really quickly. I have Knick Knack. Of course, I think Knick Knack is such an incredibly fun character to watch. Like, it's it's a character that I feel like in 2021 they never would have done it because they would be like, oh, this is offensive to put like a little person in this kind of a role, but it doesn't like make fun of him for being a little person. He's like just as intimidating or just as threatening as any other henchman would be. And I think that's pretty impressive for a franchise that isn't necessarily very progressive with its portrayal of certain groups. It was kind of cool to see Knick Knack portrayed powerfully. And I actually did include Red Grant as a henchman. I think he's incredible in that role, and I think he works so well, especially in the sequel. He's like this very cold foil to what Bond is. He's like this opposite of Sean Connery with the gray hair, and he looks sort of like him, but he's like this alien, bizarro version, like this cold, twisted version of Bond, who I think makes a perfect foil to Bond, especially in From Russia with Love, which is it has good action scenes, but it's a much more slower, methodical kind of spy thriller compared to the other two movies on either side of it and around it. So I think Red Grant's a great fit in there. And I did include Jaws in my list. I think if you're including iconic henchman, you got to include the one that came back in multiple movies and had a reappearance in Moonraker. Not necessarily great, but it's a moment to have a henchman that has multiple appearances, and he was such an iconic part that I feel like the fans wanted him to come back is how I kind of read it. Is the fans were like, "Oh, we love Jaws," so they were like, oh, let's bring Jaws back, and I think that's worth noting. And my last one is one that hasn't gotten mentioned yet. It is Xena Onatopp from GoldenEye. I think she is just ridiculous enough that she fits within like the Pierce Brosnan over like exaggerated 90s kind of Bond movies. And I also wanted to give some love to a woman henchman. And I think she is so kind of over the top, and she has like this femme fatale to the extreme kind of energy that I think really fits well with Bond and fits well with the era of Bond. So she's my pick as kind of my outsider pick for the henchman. I think she's a really fun, ridiculous kind of character that never goes far enough that I'm not that it goes too far. It goes just far enough that it's ridiculous. The perfect way to do a Bond movie or a Bond villain, I would say.
All
Yeah.
right, and I have three that cross over with you guys. So first off, I just want to say, obviously, I have Nick Nack. You gotta have Nick Nack. He's great. Yeah, just like Johnny said, him and Christopher Lee are the only reason to watch The Man with the Golden Gun. Like, I'd be perfectly fine if we could somehow go back in time and just get like a Scaramanga Nick Nack movie. We don't need James Bond in that movie. It's great. And next up, just like Tristan, I have Jaws. You gotta have Jaws. I feel I wanted to include him because I think he's the only villain that's really in two movies, and then we also kind of see him reform of him turning, good, kind of by the end and having a little mini arc there with falling in love and all that, and I thought that was kind of nice.
Here's to us.
So I included Jaws, and also had Red Grant as well. Did not expect all three of us to have Red Grant, but I put him on because I like the idea of having a henchman who was designed essentially to fight James Bond and be a foe to James Bond. I thought that was really good. And then obviously Robert Shaw, great actor, and their fight scene was really great as well. And then for my fourth pick, I kind of had to go for a twofer, and that is Mr. Wint and Mr. Kidd from Diamonds Are Forever, who I thought were great. You have Crispin Glover's dad in there, and then some other guy, and
Who's never acted before.
Yeah.
The other guy.
I
They were
thought they
two
were
of my
great.
favorite characters. I love them.
I thought they were great. And as I was compiling this list, I was watching Diamonds Are Forever, and I'm like, I need more henchmen. I need a good henchman to come up. And then these two Goombas just walk into the screen, and I'm like, oh, these are my guys right here. And every scene that they were in just fully solidified more and more that they should be the henchmen. They're just kind of intimidating, but also kind of dumb. I felt like they just walked straight out of like a Coen Brothers movie or something. Like I could totally see them in The Big Lebowski. And yeah, those are my four picks. You got Nick Nack, Red Grant, Jaws, and Mr. Wint and Mr. Kidd. And so, looking at our list, I think we have three locks. Two of us had Nick Nack, all three of us had Red Grant, and two of us had Jaws. And so it's now we have to probably decide who gets that fourth spot, unless we want to do some rearranging. As far as me voting for one that wasn't on my list, I would probably go with Irma Bunt from On Her Majesty's Secret Service.
I would also go with that.
Here's my.
But I like mine because she's ridiculous and she's fun and she has that kind of high energy. But yeah, not I don't know. I mean,
she was my
it's fun.
Urban Bunt was like my honorable mention, and I was fighting back and forth honestly between Red Grant and her, and I decided ultimately that I preferred Red Grant, so I went that direction.
Yeah. Here's my other people mentioned for henchmen were Mr. Wint and Mr. Kidd. I always liked Loke from For Your Eyes Only. I thought he was one of the only interesting parts of that movie. Yeah. Necros in The Living Daylights fit that. There's so many blonde Russian henchmen like Stomper in Tomorrow Never Dies, but like Necros is like the most effective when he goes in as the milkman and just like takes everyone out. I always love that scene. And Jaws, obviously, I have on the side. I figured he'd end up making the list, but I'm surprised that both of you had him over Oddjob, because I think Oddjob is more iconic, but they did bring Jaws back for a second movie. My thing of Jaws, the reason I didn't have him on is because he turns good at the end. If we're going to go, we still count him as a henchman when they turn good at the end, I changed my vote from Irma Bunt to Mayday. And I think Mayday is the best female henchman of the franchise. I had Irma Bunt because she's evil throughout and has that, but man, I love Grace Jones as Mayday, and I know Joe just watched View to a Kill, so I want to see if he
See, to
he
me,
agrees
she
or
was
not
like
on
my
that.
least favorite part of that movie. I don't know,
Ah,
whatever it was, I was just like, I don't care about her character that much. Like, she wasn't like different enough or interesting enough to really stand out. So,
damn.
as far as like one of
Well,
those weird
no,
villains,
that's
and then I
fine.
didn't have Odd Job because I couldn't look at Odd Job without thinking of Random Task from Austin Powers. And if you want to not have a good time, read about the actor that played Random Task. So,
Oh no, I
I
don't
went
know
with
that.
Jaws
So
because Jaws is just an odd job character, but like cooler and more
yeah,
more
he
goofy.
kills a shark. Like you
yeah.
can't, go for it. So I agree, and yeah, so we'll keep Irma Bunt. You guys said, but yeah, I love Xenia. She was also in consideration. The funny thing about Mr. Wint and Mr. Kidd, Bruce Glover, who's like the weird, he's a very weird dude in real life, and Putter Smith was a jazz bassist who played um, Mr. Kidd. And when he comes on, he was kind of like nervous about doing a movie because he hadn't done anything. And um, Putter Smith is like, "Don't worry, just give me all of your lines, and we'll be fine." And the guy's like, "No, I can't do that." But yeah, Putter Smith, not a great dude in real life. I don't think, or not. Sorry, Putter Smith, great guy. Uh, I
Glover.
called him Putter Glover. No, Bruce Glover. Not a great guy. And but they had some on-screen chemistry. I like that they were a gay duo.
Oh, they were. I didn't catch that, I guess. It
How
doesn't really
you
change
need to
anything.
watch that movie again, and you'll catch it. Um,
The whole
they get
movie's
on
pretty
and
overall gay.
well, like they get on the plane, and he's like, "What?" I forget even who says it, but they're like, "Oh, she looks," or "That's a beaut," or "She looks pretty good," or whatever. And the one guy goes, "Yeah, for a woman." And then they hold hands, and it's pretty
I just
obvious.
thought they were like
And
these
then if
two
and
weird
then if it's
dudes.
not obvious enough, when Connery throws Bruce Glover, Mr. Wint, out of the boat at the end, he like gives him a wedgie or whatever, and he goes, "Ooh," like he enjoys it. If that wasn't enough of a giveaway for you, Joe,
Either way.
because there's the Bond franchise is not necessarily known for its subtlety.
Yeah.
So I'm surprised that made it past you,
Oh well. They're
but
still
I
deserving to be
appreciate
on
that.
the list. That's all I'm
Of
saying.
course, I love them. They are ridiculous characters, but they're my favorite part of that movie. Honestly, them and Charles Gray's Blowfield, I think, are great. Um, so yeah, what that gives
So
us
our
our four,
the
right?
Mount Rushmore for our show for James Bond villains, we have Knick Knack, Irma Bunt, Red Grant, and Jaws.
There we go.
And that
That's a
brings
strong
us
four.
to Tristan to
Irma
top.
Bunt, not nearly as cool a name as Onatop, but
I know Xenia on a top, great name,
Xenia
and
Onatop.
she has an orgasm every time she kills someone. Basically, like I like the henchmen that have like weird, like kinks or weird
Yeah.
things like that.
Also, I want to say I read a trivia thing. Speaking of Mayday, that in her like sex scene, or I don't know if it was officially a sex scene, but like a makeout scene with Roger Moore, she like brought
Yeah,
a black dildo, and I thought that was kind of funny. So
yeah. She brought it out to freak out Roger Moore. They did not like each other. She did not like him. You know, but
Yeah, I heard that he got along very well with most of the people on set, and for some reason, those two just did not at all get along. It kind
yeah,
of comes
they
through in the
clashed.
performance. I feel like they have a weird relationship.
Yeah, they do. But I like Mayday. Joe,
all right,
we
Tris-
disagree on that.
Tristan, what is your Mount Rushmore of worst Bond moments?
There's some rough ones, and
There's a lot.
it was hard to, you know, for a franchise with so many highs, there's also so many lows, and you don't really hear about the lows until you start watching the movies, and you're like, oh God, they really did that. I'm gonna go with one that is not as offensive as much as it is just bad and kind of like has become a problem that the franchise can't escape, and it's the line, "This never happened to the other guy." He has this kind of
This never
it's
happened to the
the
other
first
fella.
movie after Sean Connery's gone, so they have to kind of lampshade the fact that it's a new Bond, and I felt like it was really unnecessary, and it also kind of creates this whole thing you see on memes every like couple of months. It's like, oh, have you heard this in the Bond franchise? It's actually a shared code name between all of these different people, and it's like all of that essentially comes down to like this one throwaway line that they can't get past. And I don't think it's good to have these characters connecting in that way, and I just think it makes everything confusing. So that's my pick for that one. My next one is one, like I mentioned, one that was so offensive you wonder how do they do that when they did that, let alone if they did that today. And it's first you become a Japanese. Sean Connery has to literally dress up as as a Japanese man and go undercover, and you wouldn't believe that this was in a big budget franchise movie that is still acclaimed and talked about all the time. But like that was one of those moments where I was like, "There, what? Wait, rewind that scene again." And you don't expect that early in a franchise too. That's something you expect like when they've totally run out of ideas. But that was like early on. I'm gonna give it another, not necessarily a moment, it's just like a sequence of choices to dub over Gene Lazenby in a large sequence of his movie. I think that really
George.
limits his.
Tristan really struggles with this dude's name. Last week it was George Lazenby. Now it's Gene Lazenby.
You know,
We'll get it right
I'm
next
all over
week.
the place. There's too many. He's only made one movie, you know, and it was all right, but
Yeah.
I think dubbing over his performance was a big mistake, and
Or
uh,
just hiring him if you have to dub him, you know.
like why to dub over Bond in half the movie when you're trying to sell this guy as your next Bond? It hurt. He would have probably been an interesting Bond if they gave him a chance to shine, and this just kind of shows that they never really did. And my last one is not a specific moment, but it's a moment that happens a lot throughout a lot of the Bond movies, especially in Roger Moore. And I just wrote down all of the women beating because there seems to be quite a lot of that in the Bond franchise, and it makes it very hard to recommend it to people because it's like, oh, this movie is really awesome and Timothy Dalton's so cool, but also he like beats this woman, or like Sean Connery's so cool and suave, and I want to and like a role model for, and then it's like, but also he's beating women, and it's like, okay, but yeah, and that's necessarily a moment, but it's a moment that kind of happens all the time throughout the franchise. So I included that in my worst Bond moments.
Tristan, what was your third one before the women beating one?
George
I
Lazenby
didn't
dub.
write it.
Yeah, dubbing over Lazenby,
Uh,
George Lazenby. I got it now.
dubbing.
Why did I have it halfway there? Gene Lazenby. That a couple letters
Gene
missing.
Lazenby. There you
It's
go.
like
Now we're way
you're
off.
mixing George Lazenby and then Gene Roddenberry, the creator of Star Trek, into just one guy.
There you go.
Interesting guy.
All right, so that brings me to my list. And my first one, I agree with Tristan. I have first, you must become Japanese from You Only Live Twice. Just like, if it mattered at all to the plot, I could kind of maybe forgive it and understand it. But him trying to look Japanese didn't really need to happen. He could just continue to be a white British guy because he's still the entire time just in the village with the people that already know who he is. So it's just like, why did we do this? It's other than it just kind of is a little racist the whole time. He's walking around with his, weird haircut and his
slouches down.
hunch, and yeah. And they originally, when they say that, they like put stuff over his eyelids, but then I guess when he's walking around, he doesn't have stuff on his eyelid. I don't know.
Yeah.
It was just very bad. Next, I have the Tarzan Yell from Octopussy. It's half a second and it's garbage. Just like he's swinging from vines and it's just a straight up full on Tarzan Yell. And as I was watching the movie, I'm like, what the hell is number? Why? Who? Some like multiple people signed off on this. Multiple people said, you know what? You know what James Bond needs to do right now? Yell and scream like Tarzan. So, had to include that on my list.
Forgot about that one.
And my list went away. Don't see my list right now, but I also included the brother reveal from Spectre because, hey, if James Bond can do anything with his franchise, why not just copy Austin Powers? Why not have the evil villain essentially be the stepbrother of James Bond? You know,
Yeah.
it was by far and away the worst part of this movie. The worst part of the Daniel Craig movies didn't need to happen. You could have them connected in other ways. That wasn't exactly what Austin Powers, the parody of James Bond, did. So yeah, it was bad. And then finally, for my fourth slot, we talked about this before. I have just the Die Another Day intro theme, or the theme song. You're watching James Bond be tortured in the background, covered with garbage CGI, as Madonna is singing this like happy pop song. And
It's
none
so
of it
dumb.
makes any sense at all. I could understand it if it was like this slower, kind of somber moment as you're watching James Bond tortured in the background, but nope, it's like this happy pop song talking about, like, I'll just die another day. It's so bad. It's the worst of the Bond theme song montage sequences. It's garbage and it didn't need to happen. And those are my 4 picks.
Ooh, yeah, this is a tough one because you could go all offensive moments.
I tried to
You
keep
could go
one
all,
because
yeah,
for a Mount
moments
Rushmore.
of, like things like that. There's a lot of it. So my first one, I agree with Tristan on the women beating, but I specifically went to, so Sean Connery, you see it in pretty much all his movies. That's in the books. That was Ian Fleming's writing style, and it was in the 50s. So like you can kind of look past it a little bit and be like, okay, this was a moment in time. Um, and the one that I have specifically is the one time that you see Roger Moore do it in um, The Man with the Golden Gun, Roger Moore slapping Maud Adams in that movie, because Moore was like so against doing that, and he really didn't want to portray Bond in that way. And okay, you have Shauner, you have his Bond. Maybe he's the Bond that is just like, I'll do anything for the mission. I don't care who's in my way. But Roger Moore's Bond is not that. So anytime that he steps over that line, it's really, really glaring. You get one of that too, like when he pushes the kid off the boat in, I think, Live and Let Die is a little bit like that too. But
That would be a
yeah,
moment
Roger,
I would pick probably.
yeah. But Roger Moore slapping Maud Adams just stands out so much because we should be past that by now, and then they do it with Moore, and it just doesn't match the way he portrayed the character, especially in the later ones. So that's my specific one for what Tristan had, kind of the broader, Bond beats women category. I was debating on a quote, and I thought Christmas only came once a year, but I think this never happened to the other fella is a worse line than that, because at least you have precedent of bad lines about that in the Bond movies, of in For Your Eyes Only, or no, sorry, in You Only Live Twice. He says, "Oh, in Japan, the men always come first," and Bond is like, "Oh, I should move here, or I should live here, or whatever." Basically, like you get similar type of lines that are just like kind of gross. That one is super noticeable because it's at the end, but I think this turn to camera, this never happened to the other fella in a pretty serious movie outside of that is takes the cake.
Right
Um,
before he like drowned someone to death, he has
yeah,
like this little quip line to the camera.
similar to Joe's Tarzan yell. I was debating on the Kananga balloon blowing up in Live and Let Die, because that again just doesn't fit with the rest of the movie and looks super goofy. But I went with the pigeon doing the double take in Moonraker when he passes on the gondola that's driving. Like, because at least the Tarzan yell, you have that scene and you throw over a sound and it's like, okay, like in The Man with the Golden Gun, they do the same thing. You have this amazing stunt of him jumping over this bridge and doing a complete 360, and then they do a slide whistle over it. Like they just have weird moments like that. They had to do like legit camera editing to make this pigeon double take a thing. They went all in on this, and they thought this was, oh, this moment will kill. Like that's what they were thinking in that editing room, and it's just so stupid. You don't need the reaction of every person driving like that he drives by and then a pigeon. I think that one is really bad. Um, and then the other one that I have, as far as just like a scene that takes me out of it, and just, I think, people talk about, I thought Christmas Only Came Once a Year being like the worst ending of a Bond movie. I'll tell you what's way worse: the parrot bit in For Your Eyes Only, when Margaret Thatcher calls Bond and there's a parrot talking on the phone and she thinks it's Bond and he's saying ridiculous. It's the worst scene I've ever seen. It seems like a really bad advertisement for something, like a very bad phone commercial, but it's just, that is what caps off what you are selling me as. This is a serious, back down to earth Bond. We're doing For Your Eyes Only. We did Moonraker and that was too ridiculous, so we're going to really ground this franchise. And then you end the movie with a parrot talking to a Margaret Thatcher lookalike. It's wild. That scene is just, it's bizarre to me that exists. Again, that was one that, in the editing room, they were like, this is going to kill. They thought that was a great idea. Similar to that, I almost went with the hockey scene in For Your Eyes Only, when he throws hockey player henchman into a net and no one is in there, but all of a sudden the goal horn goes off. So you get like a little taste of it, but then the ending is just bizarre. So those are my four moments: are the parrot and the pigeon double take,
A lot of birds.
two bird ones. This never happened to the other fella, and Roger Moore slapping Maud Adams.
All right, so we have three that I think are locked in. We have This Never Happened to the Other Fella with 2 votes. We have First You Must Become Japanese has 2 votes. Then we also, I kind of just put woman beating for the both of you, even though Johnny went more for a specific moment, but I just said that's one thing. And so then it comes down to George Lazenby's dubbing has a vote, the Tarzan Yell has a vote, the Brother Reveal has a vote, Die Another Day theme has a vote, Pigeon Double Take has a vote, and Margaret Thatcher Phone Call with a Parrot has a vote.
Oh, stupid.
Tristan, are
The
Oh.
you
brother
leaning?
reveal is so bad.
Yeah.
I forgot about how bad that is in the context of the movie. The brother reveal from Spectre is pretty rough.
I was gonna say, for as far as like a Mount Rushmore goes, we don't really have anything like modern. We don't.
Mhm.
I mean, of what has 2 votes, we have a George Lazenby one, we have a Sean Connery one, and then we have a Roger Moore one. We don't really have anything recent, and I feel like a brother reveal from Spectre would cover that.
Yeah,
And
the
that is
brother,
far
the
and away the
brother
worst
reveal.
moment in that.
Yeah,
And
and the
it
worst
kind of
part of it is that it affects the next movie too. So like
Yeah.
you don't know how much, but
And it's
Blofeld's in it. So
yeah.
It kind of embodies all the criticisms around the movie too, because people were not happy at all about how much it connected everything together, and that's kind of like the way that Jar Jar Binks embodies everything wrong with the Phantom Menace, and people kind of like hate Jar Jar Binks because of it. I think that reveal kind of embodies like everything people don't like about Spectre.
So
yeah, that moment is definitely like the reason that you look at that. But that doesn't like kill the movie for me. But I do think like even out of these other scenes, that one is like the most enjoyable movie outside of the crazy, stupid reveal to me. Like Moonraker has a lot of wild stuff. So okay, the pigeon doing the double take like they is stupid, but the movie has a lot of dumb bits. The For Your Eyes Only is just honestly one of the worst Bond movies, I think. So like that capping off the end isn't as big of a deal. But yeah, Spectre, they had this long legal battle, finally get the rights back, and decide to go the brother route and literally just copy Austin Powers. I do think that's at least a bigger sin um, than the other moments. I will say though, as far as modern, the only other one I had in consideration is the final hand in Casino Royale. That movie is so perfect, and I think the last scene it's fun, but it's just such a coincidence. They all keep revealing the hand, and one trumps the other one every time. I would have liked it actually to come out of Bond being a good poker player and like beating him with what's it called like not showing his tell or whatever or something like that, and bluffing would be a much cooler
like getting him
ending.
to fold,
So
basically.
yeah, like do something like that. I think they went with the really easy route, and it doesn't quite fit with the rest of what they do in the movie. So I did consider that, but it's not as big of an issue
It's
as
not
the
like
brother thing.
egregious, yeah.
No.
All right, so if we're gonna go with that, that leaves our 4 Mount Rushmore moments for the show of worst Bond moments. Of This Never Happened to the Other Fella from On Her Majesty's Secret Service. First, You Must Become Japanese from You Only Live Twice. Roger Moore beating a woman from whatever movie that's from. And finally, the brother reveal of Blowfield in Spectre. And so that, with wrapping up worst moments, brings us to best moments. And we actually get to talk about the positive side of Bond. And I will kick that off. And for my first best Bond moment, I have the James Bond intro of Dr. No, of him saying Bond, James Bond. I feel like anytime you're on like maybe a movie show or anything where they're talking about James Bond, that's the clip they show. It introduces the character for the first time and tells you everything you need to know. Probably the most iconic moment from the franchise, so I had to include it. Next, I went with M and the Clock Battery from Tomorrow Never Dies. I think Judi Dench's M is one of my favorite characters in this franchise, and I think that was kind of a little nice moment to show her some agency and show that she's more than just a person behind the desk. And next, I couldn't really think of. I wanted a Q moment because Q, I think, is really good as well. And it took me a while to find a moment I really liked, but I decided to go with Q shows up in License to Kill, where basically James Bond isn't working for MI6 at the moment. He's gone rogue and working for himself, and Q decides to go on vacation and still help James Bond out and give him the gadgets he needs. So I think it shows like Q cares more. Q cares about James Bond more than just as like a coworker. That there's actually like a friendship there, and I think that was a nice fun moment. And then finally, I have kind of the Le Chiffre and James Bond torture scene from Casino Royale. So those are my 4 moments. Johnny, what are your 4 best Bond moments, or 4 Mount Rushmore
we
of Bond
have
moments?
some different ones here, but I do have Sean Connery's reveal as Bond, James Bond, and Doctor No. That's the most iconic moment you could say from the franchise, from almost any movie ever made. That is known as one of the most iconic scenes of all time. So I agree, and I went with things that I think are iconic, but also some of my favorite, rather than like, oh, this is a good moment for certain characters. Because I love Q, but I don't think there's a specific moment that I would put in like in a Mount Rushmore of like the best moments from the franchise. So I went with arguably the only other shot almost as iconic as Sean Connery's intro in Doctor No is James Bond skiing off the side of a cliff in The Spy Who Loved Me and releasing the Union Jack parachute. That, like, even just when I was a kid, my dad was like, you need to watch this one for the Union Jack parachute. And it's like, what does that mean to me? Nothing. I don't care about the British flag, but like, it's just so cool. And it really, Bond always has a backup plan. So he goes off the cliff, you don't know what he's expecting, and then he releases this parachute. And it looks iconic. It's a great end of a cold open. And I think that's just one of the overall best Bond moments. And then you go into one of the best Bond songs of all time. So I love that. And it just is very classic. I wanted to and like James Bond, I love the ski scenes, and I think that's my favorite part of all of the ski scenes. So I went with that. And then I went with because the Bond is known for being an iconic like stunt franchise. They do a lot of practical stunts and things like that. I think my favorite is the base jump in again the cold open of GoldenEye. The base jump down the big dam is so cool, and that's something like even just playing, like growing up playing GoldenEye on the N64. Like you beat that first level and you do the base jump or whatever, and then it goes into the level in the bathroom. Like I love that. So that'll always stick out to me as one of my favorite moments. And then it's tough to include something from the Daniel Craig movies because I love so much of it. Like it's tough not to include it. I really wanted to go with either the torture scene or Daniel Craig getting out of the water in Casino Royale because it's the flip of the Honey Rider. Everyone wasn't sold on his character, I don't think. And then they have that scene, and everyone's like, oh yeah, this dude's James Bond for sure. But I went with the train fight at the end, well, near the end of From Russia with Love with Red Grant and Sean Connery's Bond. It's known as maybe the best fist fight of the franchise, and it happened in an era that you didn't get a lot of that. Everything else from this franchise is really like they do time jump. They speed up the camera, like in Thunderball in the opening when you get the fight scenes. They just speed it up because they're actually fighting slow, and then they think the camera work does it. But this is just like a good claustrophobic fight. You get a gadget involved in there with the briefcase that Red Grant can't open properly. So you get a lot of Bond in there, and you just get, even without the fight, you get a lot of fun, really good back and forth dialogue of Red Grant being like, I've basically kept you alive to get you to this point. I think that's a really cool scene. So I'm going with that. And the thing I didn't mention about the Union Jack parachute is they had like 18 cameras, and for whatever reason, they all didn't work, and only one camera ended up actually catching the real scene because they had a stunt person actually go off the cliff and release the parachute, and they almost just missed it entirely, and that was like their one shot. So they ended up getting a super iconic shot out of what could have been known as like one of the biggest failures in Hollywood of just like failing to capture something. So another reason I love that scene. But those are my 4 as far as best moments of the franchise.
All right, Tristan, what are your 4?
It was really hard to narrow these down because this is a franchise with so many good moments. I mentioned at the top that even the bad movies have a couple moments that are pretty good, and there hasn't been one that I've watched so far where I thought that was like a complete waste of time. All of them at least had moments or scenes that I thought were worth mentioning. But to narrow it down, I'd focus very much on just moments because Johnny mentioned the fight in From Russia with Love. I think that's really, really a great scene. but I'm trying to look specifically at like moments that you can capture in like a GIF, essentially, like a singular moment of Bond. And for me, one of the top ones is we got mentioned a little bit earlier. It's the arrival of Honey Rider and Doctor No. I think that really establishes what a Bond girl is, and like especially in that era, it was kind of new to be seeing like a woman coming out in a bikini that scantily dressed and in full blast color and everything like that on the big screen. And they were still coming out of an era where Hollywood was very contained and like not necessarily doing these kind of like rule breaking things, and to have that come out and of course be like a really scandalous kind of scene that I think establishes the Bond girl really well. So I'm going to include that there. One that got mentioned a second ago by Johnny is the parachute jump from The Spy Who Loved Me. I think a singular moment that I think embodies all of Roger Moore. I think one of his most iconic shots and one of the most iconic shots of the franchise. So if I'm talking specific moments, it's definitely going to be like him going off that cliff. You don't know what's going to happen. You're going to see fall into his death for a second, and then there goes the parachute. And of course, the music plays right on cue and everything. It's really, really a cool moment. Next one I have is one that is a really big moment for the franchise, a really big moment for how its impact on pop culture, and that is the Blowfield reveal from You Only Live Twice, when he finally turns around and you see Blowfield's face with the scar and everything else, and you see Donald Pleasance playing Blowfield in that moment. And you built up Blowfield for how many movies now? Like from Russia with Love, he's there. You don't see him. He just kind of like, you see like his hands and he's petting the pet and everything like that. And you're finally getting to see the face of Blowfield. So I think, and Dr. Evil and all the movies that make fun of Bond villains, they always include like a guy with a scar or something like that. And I think the bad guy with the scar across his eye is like in all kinds of action movies now. And I think a lot of that comes from this specific moment right here. And my last one, I wanted to pay some love to Daniel Craig. And I also wanted to pay some love to a really iconic part of the Bond franchise that I think is one of my favorite parts to see in every single movie of the Bond franchise. And that's the gun barrel sequence. I think Daniel Craig has the coolest one. And at the end of his cold open, he is shooting in the bathroom. And then like that shot of him shooting the guy kind of cuts right into the gun barrel. I thought it was a really awesome transition. It's my favorite it's one of the coolest of the gun barrel sequences. And I think it, for me, represents all of the gun barrels across the whole franchise, which are always kind of cool to see.
Yeah, those are great choices. This one,
right, yeah.
I figured with these we're not going to have as much commonality.
Yeah,
Joe, where does that put us in terms of what got multiple votes?
We have two right now that have two. We have the Bond intro from Dr. No of Bond, James Bond, has two, and then we have the from The Spy Who Loved Me, him skiing off the side of the cliff and the parachute releasing, has two. Everything else has one. So we have M in the Clock Battery, Q in License to Kill, the Lashif torture scene. We have the GoldenEye base jump from Russia with Love, the train fight with Red, Honey Rider's arrival, the Blofeld reveal in You Only Live Twice, and then the Daniel Craig gun barrel scene.
All right. So, yeah, it's tough because that basically, so that's one on each of your lists, two from mine because I crossed over with each of you for the two moments that got multiple votes. If I was going to cast my vote for the others, I agree with Tristan. I think the gun barrel sequence is hard to leave off because it's iconic in like every movie, and that is also my favorite one. I like the way they did that. So that would be a vote for one of them.
I would be okay with that. I would lock that in, the Daniel Craig gun barrel. From which movie? Is that from Casino Royale?
That's from Casino Royale,
yeah.
And then...
So that leaves us with a few options here. I think the train scene with Red Grant, yeah, maybe you could say it's not just a moment, it's a full extended scene rather than one moment. So if I'm going to go one moment, for mine, the base jump in GoldenEye is more of a moment than like a full scene. I agree, like the same argument with Lashif. The torture scene is not really like a moment, it's a full scene. Blofeld's reveal is super iconic. But that one trips me out a little bit because I think if they just stuck with either Donald Pleasance or kept the scar on Blofeld, I think that would be more iconic for the franchise. But it is still super iconic. So then that's like a good moment. I don't even know what Joe's talking about with the clock battery in Tomorrow Never Dies, and I've seen that movie like 3 or 4 times semi recently. And I do love Q in License to Kill, but I don't know. That's not. He has a few good, fun scenes, but again, that's not exactly one that I'd be like, oh, it's a moment.
Yeah.
Maybe it's revealed that he shows up, but
I think
I
the
don't know.
GoldenEye base jump is definitely a
Yeah,
singular moment out of the whole
that's what I was
Pierce
thinking. Leaving
Brosnan
notes
era
as
that I
well.
think is more noting. I will say, like, we might be in my list. We'll be talking about that in a second when we talk about cold opens. So it might come up again in the Mount Rushmore conversation. But for me, I didn't pick that as a moment because for me, I like the whole cold open as a whole more than just that singular moment because it is a great moment. But I'm going to be talking about the cold open as a whole in a bit. So that's the
Right.
reason that I didn't have that on my list personally.
Yeah, it's funny because like if you looking at this and let's say that is what makes our list, you could essentially say that okay, so the opening of Doctor No is the Bond reveal. The parachute jump is from a cold open of The Spy Who Loved Me, and the gun barrel is the end of the cold open in Casino Royale. So do we want to maybe not go with the base jump just because then it would be all 4 moments at the best would all be from like the very openings? Like, is there anything that stuck out to you guys that like maybe the end of a movie that was more of a
I thought
moment
Christmas only came
or
twice a year would be mine. Or
One
once a year.
well,
moment
I
that
have like I have the Golden
I
Gate Bridge fight in A View to a Kill, but that's more of just a full scene. But I just think that's a very iconic moment, them
for me,
fighting on it.
I consider for my James Bond moment. My fifth one, essentially on the list here, was going to be the final scene of Casino Royale when we finally get Daniel Craig saying Bond, James Bond, and this theme cuts in and it cuts to the credits. So that was my pick for Bond, but we already have Sean Connery's Bond on there, so we can't actually put that twice.
And the first gun barrel, which they basically it's like a similar type
Yeah.
of thing. Um, so if we're going based on what the list is then, and I think it encompasses more of like a different aspect of the series. The Blowfield reveal is like the most iconic villain reveal of the series, and I think that's more of a moment that's different than anything else we have.
Yeah, I was thinking.
So maybe I think I might go for that as well.
Yeah.
Because we have the Bond reveal, I think a villain reveal, and like unless there's another one you guys think is more iconic in the series than that, I think that's the most iconic like villain reveal.
Yeah, I think even people don't even know in the mind. Like I didn't know until I watched this time that they got rid of the scar on Blowfield. I was like, oh, Blowfield's the guy with the scar, and like I guess because of the impact of this moment on me, I knew that shot and I knew that character from that moment, and so I think that resonates pretty well as a moment across culture for Bond.
Yeah. All right. So are we locked in with those four?
I think so. Yeah.
All right. So our four best Bond moment Mount Rushmore is the James Bond intro from Doctor No. We have James Bond skiing off the cliff and releasing the Union Jack parachute in The Spy Who Loved Me. We have the Blofeld reveal in You Only Live Twice, and the Daniel Craig gun barrel moment from Casino Royale.
I like those. And those are good like moments rather than scenes.
Yeah. And that brings us to
that down because there's just so many good ones.
Yeah, and that brings us to Bond Girls. And Johnny, do you want to kick that off?
Yeah, this was a really tough one because honestly, if you look at the franchise as a whole, I feel like maybe I used to think there weren't as many iconic ones, but then if you look at like rewatching it, I'm like, I really like a lot of the Bond Girls. But I'm gonna just go with four that I think are not only iconic but some of my favorites. I gotta go Vesper Lind, played by Eva Green in Casino Royale. She's my favorite. That's the best, the most like. That's the actual relationship in the movie that, out of any of them, like their connection probably rings the truest. And I like that she has more of a backstory, and ends up, dying at the end and stuff. I think that's like what they really wanted to go for in On Her Majesty's Secret Service, but got that with Casino Royale. Years and years later. But she's great. I love when she's crying in the shower and Bond like licks her fingers to signify like the blood is not, it's like off your hands. You can, this isn't your fault. And then at the end when she's drowning, she does the same thing to Bond. That's like the best writing probably in any Bond movie, just like little things like that, to kind of signify like this isn't your fault. The blood's not on your hands. I didn't die because of you type of thing. but yeah, I think she's great in it. And they have good chemistry. And then same thing, I didn't have this as the moment, but Honey Rider, she was the first Bond girl. Ursula Andress was a huge icon after this movie, mainly because of the bikini reveal. And she's in a bikini most of that movie walking around. But she has the look. She's a good character. I like her a lot. She kind of has what they introduce in some of them, where she has kind of a revenge plot of her dad was killed by Dr. No. I wish it went in a little stronger in that, but I think she's super iconic. I went with Tracy Bond from On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Diana Rigg is so good in that, and I think that's one of my favorite performances of a Bond girl. And I think when you have George Lazenby, who's basically a first-time actor, she really carries that relationship and makes it more believable than it would have been. So I think she's good in that. So I have her. And then I really struggled with one of the most iconic actual characters, but is super problematic, which is Pussy Galore, because she's a lesbian that Bond turns. I think that she's a much more iconic character. But I didn't go with her because of that reason, and I wanted to go with the kind of kick-ass Bond girl, so it was between two, and I went with Natalia from GoldenEye, because she is super capable by herself. She's a hacker. She actually helps the mission. She, stops the satellite and stuff while Bond's chasing Trevelyan. Like, she is a great, strong character, and like that was good after not really having that for a few movies and stuff. And I think that was like the best version of that. I really like Natalia, and you will actually get her backstory. You get her, being in there when all her friends and coworkers get murdered. I like a Bond girl with agency, and I love Natalia. I think it's a really, really strong character and a great Bond girl. And while I hated her in the actual GoldenEye game because she'd just always be in your way or go off and die and you'd lose the mission, but she in the actual movie she's super capable, and I like her a lot. So those are my four, and I kind of strayed away from my actual list on that last choice, but I think that's my strongest four.
All right, Tristan, you are up. You're muted, I think.
Oh, that would help. My first pick is one that Johnny decided not to put on his list. One that I did not have Johnny's strength, because my number one is Pussy Galore. I think the problematic elements of her character are not present in the movie version. I mean, they're there kind of, but it's not stated directly that he's converting her. So in my mind, that my headcanon is like, hey, maybe she's just like this modern day contemporary woman who's like, will sleep with whoever. That's kind of like a modern day view with sexuality. It's like she's a lesbian, but when Sean Connery comes along, it's like, we'll go for it. So yeah, I think she embodies kind of like the funny names too, of like them giving Bond girls on the nose kind of names, and she has a really iconic entrance. I think she's really funny, and she is
she's she's pretty badass.
Yeah, she's confident. She stands up on her own. I like that she's not like this ditzy young kind of girl that just falls over Sean Connery immediately. She stands toe to toe with Bond and is very assertive and confident, and she has like this energy of like a 1930s like femme fatale out of like the noir movie. So I think I really like her performance in that. I think it's a really great character. My next is one that Johnny did put on his list, and it's Vesper Lynd from Casino Royale. I think if you're talking about the couple of times they tried to be like, oh, here's the one that Bond actually does care about, and it goes wrong. They did it once or twice throughout the franchise where they tried to be like, oh, here's the real the climactic Bond girl, the Tracy Bond. I think this is by far the most effective. I really buy their chemistry, and I really like the way that they write her character to have the impact on Bond. Like, she's the inspiration for the martini, and more than that though, but he inspires like how his relationship with women throughout the whole franchise. So I think they did a great job working her into the lore of Bond in that way. Next up, I have Octopussy, played by Maud Adams. I think she is another one of the most iconic named Bond villains. Also, the actress played more than one Bond girl, so I think I give her some props for that, for being two Bond
Yeah,
girls.
they brought her back for Octopussy because they liked her so much in the original one.
And
And with the Golden Gun.
I also give them respect for casting a woman who is at least is close to Roger Moore's age more, and not like this very young
Yeah.
type of actress. And I think similarly to Pussy Galore, I think she's someone that really can stand up toe to toe with Bond, and I like that in a woman who in this franchise, someone who isn't kind of just immediately falling for him and immediately all over him, someone who can be as confident as he is essentially in a room. So that's my pick for my third one. And my last one is someone that got brought up earlier in the episode. I think it counts as a Bond girl. I'm saying Mayday. That's my pick for my fourth slot. I think she's a really fun character out of one of my favorite Bond movies, and I want to give props to like she's literally a henchman directly connected to the bad guy and then turns to Bond in the end, and it's like that's kind of a cool arc for a woman who's all the way on the bad guy side and then turns all the way to Bond's side. It's kind of a cool moment for her. So, and the performance is really fun too. So I wanted to give some love to that.
I like that. Yeah, Maud Adams is the most age-appropriate Bond girl that Roger Moore ever had, and she's, I believe, 18 years younger than him, and is the closest in age to Roger Moore than any of the Bond girls in the franchise. That might be different because I know a couple of them like originally lied about their ages. So when I looked that up originally, because it was in like my Bond reviews that I wrote, I don't know if that is necessarily true. But yeah, every other Bond girl, at least what they on record on like IMDb, what their age is, every other Bond girl's 20 years younger than Roger Moore. So yeah, that gets to be a bit of a problem in like A View to a Kill, when he was older than the actress's mom, and he was like, "Yeah, I'm done. I'm retiring." So Joe, that brings us to your four.
All right, I have some commonalities with both of you. So first up, I have Honey Rider, played by Ursula Andress in Doctor No. She was the original Bond girl, kind of set, the tone of what it is to be a Bond girl. Super iconic intro, and so had to go with her. Next up, obviously, Vesper Lynd, played by Eva Green in Casino Royale. I think the perfect love interest for Daniel Craig's Bond, and I think it'd be kind of cool to see more of that moving forward than just like one-off kind of like random women. And so I had to go with her. Next up, just like Johnny, had Tracy Bond, played by Diana Rigg in On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Really, the only Bond girl that James actually marries. And it would have been kind of interesting if George Lazenby decided to sign on and they had more of like a multi-movie arc with her instead of just like, oh, he didn't sign on, so we're just gonna kill her so the next Bond doesn't have a wife. And then finally, I went in a different direction with my fourth one, and I went with Dr. Holly Goodhead, played by Lois Chiles in Moonraker. Like Johnny, I wanted more of a Bond girl with a little bit more agency, and I liked her as a pilot that kind of, wasn't exactly head over heels with Bond in the beginning, so I decided to go with her as my fourth pick.
The one
you can tell we watched a lot of Bond because you just said Howie Goodhead without even blinking, and we were like, yeah, that sounds like a character's name.
that name, that's a pretty wild one too.
That was part of why I wanted to go with her, because I wanted one of those like Pussy Galore kind of names that.
Yeah, because Honey Rider doesn't do it enough. I almost went with Wai Lin over Natalia from Tomorrow Never Dies because she's like the most badass Bond girl in terms of like, having agency and stuff. But I overall I went with Natalia over her. But I think for this, because we have some obviously with multiple votes,
we have
but I
three
do
that
think
have multiple.
it's maybe. Yeah, okay. So go over what's multiple, and then we'll discuss.
We have Vesper Lynd has 3, and then Honey Rider and Tracy Bond both have 2.
Okay. My one argument against Pussy Galore making the list is that I feel like you need her or Honey Rider because those are like the two iconic ones from the early ones. So it'd be up in the air on like you need either one. The only reason I didn't include Pussy Galore is because I already had Honey Rider because she was the first. But I think overall iconic character, Pussy Galore is a better character, maybe not as iconic in like looks, but maybe better character. And then my argument against myself and Joe's list is, well, as much as I love Diana Rigg, and I think she's probably the best actress in the best actor in general in that whole movie, is it a little redundant having Vesper and Tracy Bond? You kind of get this similar story, but it's more fleshed out with Vesper.
Yeah, I was gonna make that argument. Is you get the same idea out of Vesper. It's like here's the one that actually mattered to Bond, but I think it works a lot better. I didn't buy Diana Rigg's chemistry at all with Bond in that, and I didn't even want to say the guy's
I
name
was
wrong
about to
because I
ask,
didn't.
what was that actor's name? Oh yeah.
I was gonna say it, but I was like, you know what? No, let's just pass that one. But yeah, I didn't buy her chemistry with the lead actor at all, and I think I definitely bought Vesper as a love interest for Bonds, and I would love to have put Tracy Bond on there just because she's the one that tied Bond down, but I just think Vesper does that a little bit better.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
So
thought about that as I was doing the list. I was like, is this
mhm.
redundant? And then I'm like, well, we'll figure that out, I guess, when we do the final list. So.
Yeah, I thought about that while Tristan was doing his, um, and yeah, that kind of turned me against having both. But I do think Diana Rigg is great in the movie. But yeah, George Lazenby, you don't get enough chemistry because he's just not a very good actor. But
Yeah.
my personal favorite is either Vesper or Camille from Quantum. But I don't think she has like the iconic background
No, no.
like that. Some of these other ones are. So I like Vesper on there,
So are
and then
Vesper and Honey
it's a
Rider
decision
locked in?
between Honey Rider or Pussy Galore or both. I mean, I'm not going to say that. That's not as redundant, I guess, as like Tracy and,
Yeah.
and Vesper.
I think
But
we
where do
should
we
definitely.
fall on that?
I think Honey Rider should probably make the list as the first Bond girl, and I had her in the moment because I think her coming out in the bikini like that
Mhm.
is such an iconic moment. So I
Yeah.
definitely think that she has a worthy spot on the list, whether it's in here or on the moment spot.
I would also
Yeah.
argue, I like almost maybe to put both on the list. Because if you were to go out in the street and just ask someone like name a Bond girl, I feel
Hmm.
like over half of the people are gonna say Pussy Galore.
Yeah. Yeah. I
And
like that. And
I like that she's different. She feels a lot different than Honey Rider, where Honey Rider was purely the sex symbol, like the super attractive model that was like, oh, we're hiring her because she's going to be gorgeous and
Yep.
she's going to be like the sex goddess of all the teenage boys watching this movie in the theater. And uh, 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 Pussy Galore is not necessarily that. She's different than she's not just like a purely sex symbol. She's sexy and she's attractive, but she's not there just to be like enticing. She actually has a bit of a more complexity and she's a bit more human looking and she's a bit more grounded and interesting as a character.
Yeah. So I
right.
say we lock that in. Pussy Galore.
Yeah, I think that's a lock. I kind of talked myself more into that and out of Tracy Bond as
Yeah.
as we went on. Um, so our last spot we have. So far though, let's see what we have. So we have a Craig era, and we have two Connerys. So I think
Yeah.
we definitely need to go either Roger Moore or Brosnan
Yeah.
here. So I think our best options are. Um, I mean, it looks like those are the other things anyway. We have Octopussy, Mayday, Dr. Holly Goodhead, and Natalia, all in the like realm of time we're kind of looking at to put on there. Um,
Not
where do you
Jinx.
guys fall on like those? Not Jinx or Christmas Jones either.
I
Um.
think as much as Octopussy was my pick, I feel like we have enough of those like pun names, especially
Mm-hmm.
all puns on literally the same
Yeah.
word.
I'm almost thinking Natalia from the was it Tomorrow Never
From
Dies or
Goldeneye.
Goldeneye? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good pick.
Yeah, I like her a lot in that, and I think she's kind of underrated in terms of like memorable characters. But like for our generation, like growing up, she was the one in Goldeneye, which was the most popular movie because the game was there.
Yeah.
She kind of got hated on because in the game she's fucking annoying, but um,
That's all my
she
memory is like from her in the game. So I was like
right.
immediately I saw the movie and I was like, I hate you. And then she like won me over across the course of the movie. I was like, oh, you're actually a good character.
Yeah. All right. So I think
Yeah,
we're going Natalia.
and I love her line when she flips when Bond, when Trevelyan is like threatening to kill her, and Bond's like, I don't give a shit about her, basically. And then at the end, when they take Bond, and Natalia's like, I don't give a shit about him. Like, I like that she has that
Yeah.
attitude towards it.
Yeah.
So I think that's
And
a
she kind of
good
takes up of
modern day Bond girl.
what I wanted from Holly Goodhead. So
Hmm.
I'm good with that.
And Dr. Holly Goodhead would be such a better character if she had a different name.
Yeah.
That one, like the names don't always throw me off, but in that movie, it just doesn't fit her.
Yeah.
Um, but I think she's a good character. And yeah, shout out Maud Adams is great. I like her in both Bond movies that she's in.
All right.
But yeah, I think that's a strong four. So what's
So
our
our
final four,
Mount
Joe?
Rushmore of Bond girls is Vesper Lind from Casino Royale, Honey Rider from Doctor No, Natalia from Goldeneye, and Pussy Galore from Goldfinger.
All right.
And that
I
brings
like
Really
us
good list.
to Cold Opens, which is going to be kicked off by Tristan.
Cold opens. I'll give away the one that I already gave away real quick here and say that I included the cold open from oops, I just erased it. Go back.
R.I.P.
From Goldeneye in mind because I think it really does a great job of establishing that era of Bond and like the action-packed kind of tone they're going for with those movies. And that bungee jump scene is super iconic. It's something that I knew about before I even knew about Bond. It was ingrained into my childhood, from watching the trailers and everything else. And I always remember that with the game. And so I think that cold open, I think, is really a great tribute to Pierce Brosnan, who didn't really get to do a ton of great Bond movies after this one, but this is, I think, like the embodiment of everything cool about his version of the character. And I also have the open of From Russia with Love. I think is a really cool one where they do the fake out of Bond being on this mission. You think it's kind of just an actual Bond mission that just went wrong, and he's getting strangled, and you're like, oh my god, Bond's about to get captured or killed, and then they pop the lights on and you get revealed that it was just a practice. And I think that's a cool way to bring Bond in again for the sequel. Next up, I have Goldfinger. I think that's easily the most iconic of the openings for me, at least when he's walking with that suit and everything else. And I think it's just such a really great look for Bond. And I'll always like Bond will never be as cool as Sean Connery walking into that room in the white suit. And I think that was just like such a fundamental Bond scene. I also have the opening of uh, A View to a Kill is my one here. I think that is such a great action packed. I love that movie. It's one of my favorite Bond movies that I've seen, at least of the ones that I've seen so far. And I think when it goes from like the ski to the other actions, it's just like very fun. And I think it embodies Roger Moore's era so well. Where it's just like you're here to have a good time. You're here to see Bond do cool stuff and do jumps and do flips and use gadgets. And I think that opening embodies like everything I really liked about Roger Moore.
All right, and what was your second movie?
From Russia with Love.
All right, just a second. I gotta write that down. All right, so that brings us to my list. I have some commonality with Tristan. My first one, I have A View to a Kill. I remember going into the movie knowing it was one of the most hated Bond movies, and as soon as Bond started snowboarding down the mountain as the Beach Boys played, I'm like, anyone who ever disliked this movie is wrong. This moment is amazing. And so obviously that had to make my list. What else do I have on my list? Nice if my phone quit shutting off.
I had a similar moment though when that opening shot came in, and I was like, "Who lied to me and said this was a bad one?" Because this is not.
I immediately texted Johnny during that moment, and I'm like, I know what's making my Mount Rushmore of cold opens. Next, I have the dogfight scene from Tomorrow Never Dies of him hopping in the plane to take out the other plane. It was just a really good moment that I really enjoyed. My third moment, I have the fight and chase scene in Skyfall that ends with Moneypenny trying to shoot the guy that Bond is fighting, and he's telling her to take the shot, and she ultimately misses, shoots Bond, and he falls into the water below. And then finally, just like Tristan, I had the Goldfinger moment with, I kind of think it set the stage of what the cold open is going to be. Him in the white suit's super iconic, so I had to go with that. And those are my
All
four
right.
picks.
There was a surprising omission to both lists after the discussion we had about moments, and that is The Spy Who Loved Me. Great ski scene to open. And you have the iconic moment we talked about with the parachute. But besides that, I like that. First of all, it sets up the plot because you have a nuclear warhead go missing. I like the unrelated ones, but I do like when the cold open sets up the initial plot, and then maybe Bond is off doing something else. And then the other part that I think people don't really give credit for, but I really like in it is they tell the Russians that, okay, call your agent, and they talk about, okay, Agent XXX, that's the best we've got. Let me call Agent XXX. And then it cuts to a dude who kind of looks like James Bond, like a really handsome guy in the bed next to a woman. and then the phone rings or whatever, and it's revealed that Anya, the woman in the bed, is Agent Triple X. It's not the guy that you might have expected. And then it goes into the whole ski sequence, and you get Bond killing her boyfriend, which sets up the plot, and the nuclear warhead go missing. So I think that overall is maybe the best Bond cold open, and the most iconic. So I really like that one. Casino Royale, I went with over. Joe has Skyfall. I think Casino Royale, you get the black and white opening, and him revealing like, oh, you only have one kill. What's your second? And him killing him, and then in the bathroom scene, like you get an intense fight scene, and then it ends with the first gun barrel of Craig's run. So I think those two are great. Those are my two personal favorites, and then I also have Goldfinger as well, because you get Bond with a wetsuit that has a duck on the head to disguise, and then he gets out of the water, he takes it off, and he's in the iconic like white suit, like Tristan mentioned. I like that. I like when Bond is actually being a spy and he's on a mission, and you get that right in the opening. And it's not really related to the rest of what happens. It's just like a cool sequence to introduce Bond in a new way. And then I have GoldenEye. You get everything. You get the base jump. You get Trevelyan, dying. Which sets up the plot later. You get the only part of this one that always like makes me takes me out of it a little is when the plane is falling and Bond is dives after it and he catches up to it, and I'm like, that's not how falling works. And that's like one of my big movie sins anytime I see it. But other than that, like I think that is a great one, GoldenEye. It's iconic for the game, like that's how it opens. That's your first mission, and it's iconic for the movie because it's so great, and you get an awesome stunt and introduce characters. You get for England James, you get like the little small establishment of the relationship between Trevelyan and Bond. So yeah, those are my four. So Casino Royale, GoldenEye, The Spy Who Loved Me, and Goldfinger.
All right, so
are my four.
I think we potentially have three locked in. One of them might be a surprise to Bond fans. We have GoldenEye with 2 votes, A View to a Kill with 2 votes, and Goldfinger.
That's wild. I will fight against that.
Goldfinger with 3 votes. No, if my number one draft pick is A View to a Kill, so I will fight to the death for A View to a Kill to be on our Mount Rushmore of cold opens.
It's in my top 3 so far, the Bond movies.
I like A View to a Kill as like one of the most watchable. It's one of the worst made Bond movies.
Don't care.
But it's definitely great. One of the most watchable, like fun. And that was one too, like when I even just rewatching it after knowing like how it's looked at by most people, I'm like, this movie is more fun than I kind of remember it. Even though every fight scene is Bond being 60 years old and it's very slow and that's the most noticeable stunt double movie you could maybe ever watch. But yeah, the thing about A View to a Kill is it starts off, you think it might be kind of like this might be a pretty grounded Bond film, and then the turn is as soon as the Beach Boys song kicks in. And it's not even the Beach Boys, because they couldn't afford the rights to the Beach Boys song. It's a cover band doing the Beach Boys song. It takes me out of that movie right from the beginning. Like it sets up, I guess, what you did, but I think that's the worst song choice in any Bond movie.
It was perfect,
even
song
more
choice.
So than anything. It was so. I love the Beach Boys, but I don't need it in my Bond movie. And it's not even the real song. At least don't be cheapos if that's what you're gonna do. If that's what you need.
You're not gonna convince me here.
Oh my god! How like if you're gonna go with a ski sequence in the opening, go with the one from Spy Who Loved Me that he has the Union Jack parachute that we already put as one of our top moments of the franchise.
I would have rather had him snowboarding listening to the Beach Boys than that.
Look, I was into this scene, and I was like, this is a pretty cool opening. I'm not sure what people are talking about saying this movie's so bad. And then the Beach Boys song came out, and I was like, oh, this is a 5 out of 5 right now. Look at this.
See, that's the thing. If me and Tristan both love it, then you know it's good, because that's pretty rare.
Oh my god. I'm glad, I gave it a 6.5 out of 10 in my actual.
I think I gave it an 8
rankings, but yeah, I don't know about that. That was definitely not even one that crossed my mind in terms of cold opens. Like I didn't think that would make anyone's list, and then it makes both of your lists.
Yeah, because we're smart and we're cultured. So I would say if we have those 3 locked in, we need a Craig one, and so it would come down to Casino Royale and Skyfall.
So what are our locks in? A View to a Kill,
GoldenEye, and Goldfinger.
And Goldfinger. One of my favorites that wasn't mentioned too is a Dalton one. I really like the opening of the Living Daylights, the training sequence.
Yeah.
I think is fun.
License to Kill is good too with the capturing of the plane.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
debated Living Daylights and
That
the
Nolan
From Russia with
cut.
Love because they both open up with like these training sequences. I think From Russia with Love I picked this because it was early on, and I like the kind of fake out of you not realizing what it is until it's over. But yeah, I also like Living Daylights because it kind of establishes Timothy Dalton so quickly after Roger Moore is like a more serious Bond. So that was a close call for me for sure.
but yeah, if we go Craig era, I think the more iconic one. I like Skyfalls, but the problem with Skyfalls is it has a lot of. It doesn't have like a cool stun or anything to point to. It has them on top of helicopters and does face replacement, which it always that again is like jarring to me in Bond movies when it's clear like, oh, that's just another guy that they put Craig's face on riding a motorcycle.
Yeah.
I'd rather just have a stuntman that you don't see the face than do face replacement. So for me, like the tiebreaker on that would go to Casino Royale. Obviously,
I'd
that's
be
on
okay
my
with
list, but it's super. I think it's more iconic. You had this whole backlash of Daniel Craig being Bond because he has blue eyes and blonde hair. So they do the opening sequence in black and white, and then you get to the title sequence, and it ends with a close-up shot of him, bright blue eyes. Like they really make that stand out. So I like that the cold open. I think functions better for the movie than a lot of other choices do.
Yeah, I think similarly to how my argument for GoldenEye was that Casino Royale also had a lot to prove for itself coming in after, like, especially having a decent gap between movies, between the Brosnan movies and then the Craig kind of reboot, and people came in kind of hesitant, and there was a lot of pressure on the opening scene, and I think people pretty unanimously liked that movie a lot, and I think the opening scene is one of the parts people like the most. So I think it really accomplished a lot by having to win back a lot of people.
Yeah.
All
I
right, so
agree.
is that locked? Those four locked in?
I can't
Yes,
believe
if
we
you
got Ridicule on
wait,
here.
so we don't even have a Spy Who Loved Me on here. Maybe
No,
the most iconic opening of any of the Bond movies,
no.
We
and you
got the
guys
moment.
outvoted me with A View to a Kill,
Yeah, so we have
with
our
the
four
bad Beach Boys cover.
our four Mount Rushmore cold opens. We have Goldeneye, A View to a Kill, Goldfinger, and Casino Royale. There we go.
This is what
All right,
Bobby
well,
gets
we'll
for
get
not
to
coming on the
villains, and I have a
episode.
feeling of a villain that might pop up on a couple lists.
Probably. This is what Bobby gets for not coming on the episode. He could have been the one to talk
He
us
could have
down.
been the voice of reason on that one. Maybe.
I think you'll be surprised at my list, honestly, of villains. And speaking of, I'm kicking it off. So Johnny will get to either see how much he loves or hates my list of villains. First off, I went with Blowfield. I think you have to go with Blowfield. It just comes down to which Blowfield do you pick. And I chose Donald Pleasance from You Only Live Twice. I think it's the most iconic look of him. His intro is probably the most iconic moment of Blowfield, so that was the easy choice for me. Next, I went with Lashif, played by Mads Mikkelsen in Casino Royale. I think he's my favorite. I mean, he's definitely my favorite of the Craig era villains, and Mads Mikkelsen's amazing, so I had to go with him. I also went with Auric Goldfinger, played by Gert Frobe in Goldfinger. I think he was kind of the prototypical of what you would expect from a Bond villain moving forward. Like, there was Dr. No before him, but he was just kind of boring and there. He didn't really stand out as much. And finally, for my fourth one, I went with Alec Trevelyan, played by Sean Bean in Goldeneye. It was kind of the only time we've had a former. I mean, I guess in Skyfall we had the same thing, but he didn't have a relationship as much with Bond, so this one was like Bond's friend is now a villain, and so I like that dynamic. So those are my four picks: Blofeld, Lashif, Auric Goldfinger, and Alec Trevelyan.
All right.
And that
For
leads
me,
us to Johnny.
so I also have Blofeld. You got to have Blofeld on here. I think Donald Pleasance is the most iconic look. But I think the Blofeld that I want to go with, narrowly edging out Charles Gray, I'm going to go with Telly Savalas in On Her Majesty's Secret Service's Blofeld. You really get to see him as the main villain in a full movie. It's a little confusing because they're not supposed to have met yet. That movie is supposed to have come out before For Your Eyes or for You Only Live Twice, so it doesn't really make sense that he doesn't recognize Bond if you watch them in order. But I think Telly Savalas is so much fun as Blofeld and really makes that character stand out. Donald Pleasance really downplays the role. which I think is just a choice that he made, which works for the movie. But I think overall, my favorite like performance of Blofeld is Telly Savalas. I also have Alec Trevelyan. Again, Sean Bean is great. You don't really get the kind of revenge angle and any of the villains before this of he Bond screwed up the mission and changed the time, and now I have to kill Bond too because he betrayed me in a way, or basically he takes it personally. I like their relationship. I like his performance. He's great. I also have Goldfinger. I think he's the most iconic of the actual Craig villains. I think Red Grant might be up there, but but again, he's what I would consider a henchman, not a main Bond villain. I wanted to stick with main villains here, so I went with Goldfinger. And then it was tough on the last one. I really like Scaramanga. I really like Sanchez in License to Kill, but I ended up going with, while I do love Lashif, and he might be my favorite villain of the Craig era, I think actual like performance wise and being a Bond villain and being like just more of a high stakes villain, Lashif's kind of a low level Spectre guy, or Quantum guy at the time. I went with Silva in Skyfall. I think he has the best villain entrance, and like his monologue is incredible in that, and it's just a really fun performance. You get the scene with him in the chair, and Javier Bardem is like groping him, and Bond's like, "How'd you what makes you think this would be my first?" Like they got a lot of good back and forth, and I like that. Like Trevelyan takes it personal for Bond, I like Silva having a personal vendetta against M, and in the end, he kind of wins and succeeds because M does die at the end. Spoiler alert for Skyfall, but Silva was pretty much successful in his mission. He didn't kill Bond, but he got M, and that's pretty much all he was setting out to do from the beginning of the movie. So I think that is my 4. So yeah, Goldfinger, Blofeld by Telly Savalas, Alec Trevelyan, and Silva.
All right, Tristan, what are your 4?
So my 4, I'll start off with one that's gotten mentioned every time so far, and it's Goldfinger. I think he is the embodiment of that kind of cheesy Bond villain that is over the top, but not too over the top. He's a perfect balance, and I think it's a whole cool story behind it where the actor pretty much faked his way into the role and could barely speak English at all. And in real life, the actor was like this hero who saved Jewish people during the Holocaust and hid them in his house. And he's a fascinating kind of guy. So I think him playing Goldfinger is a really interesting choice, like this real life hero who plays this maniacal villain. Next up, I of course have Blowfield, but I actually went with a different one from each of you. I went with Blowfield from Russia with Love. I think it's a really interesting choice to have him not have his face shown and to have him just be this menacing kind of presence in the background. I think that's where Blowfield as a character works the best, not as like the main antagonist that Bond's going directly against, but as the guy in the background, the shadow kind of manipulating events into the way that he wants them to be. So I went with From Russia with Love. I think that was a really interesting portrayal of a villain for Bond and a good introduction for like to the continuity essentially, because you could have easily just had these be one-off kind of adventures, and that kind of introduces a little bit of a sense of continuity, at least within the Sean Connery movies. Next up, I have one that Johnny mentioned as a potential choice for him that he didn't end up going with, and that's Sanchez from License to Kill. I mentioned in my henchman that I was really thought Red Grant was interesting because he was like this foil of Bond. He was like kind of the best and the worst of Bond as a character, and I think Sanchez is that also. He's like this very smooth talking, charismatic kind of guy that everyone can help but listen to, and I think that is part of Bond as well. And I think he also embodies that violence, that like need for vengeance, and especially in Timothy Dalton's Bond has that kind of anger inside him. And I think Sanchez represents the darkness of Bond kind of exaggerated to its full extent. So I think he's a really fascinating villain, and especially in a franchise when there's so many huge, ridiculous big villains, to just have one of them be like, here's a guy in a suit doing like drug deals in this other country. He's not necessarily as ridiculous as some of the other villains are. And lastly, I have the one that Johnny called me out for possibly having. I think Christopher Walken as Max Zorin. Zorin is so good in Video Kill. He's so ridiculous and like hamming it up the whole entire time. And Christopher Walken has become like a meme at certain points in his career. And I think this is one of his like most me more the performances, but it's also like a good performance. So I think he's having so much fun with it, and I think you can tell like everybody in this movie is just having like a good time pretty much. And Christopher Walken, I think, is just having the time of his life playing this completely ridiculous character in one of my favorite Bond movies. So I have him as my fourth pick.
I knew he'd pop up once you two were so sold on A View to a Kill. Like Zoran's got to be on one of their lists at least.
Yeah.
So what does that lock us in?
All right, so
Goldfinger and
Blowfield is
Blofeld?
locked in with 3. We just have to basically determine, I think, which Blowfield gets in. And then Goldfinger has 3 and Trevelyan has 2.
All right.
So I think probably first order of business is figure out which Blowfield is making our list.
I'll just throw this out there. Tristan, I like the aspect he went to of he works better as this mysterious guy you don't really see. And then I went with the complete opposite because I liked having him front and center as the villain.
Yeah.
But overall, Donald Pleasance is the most iconic look, and it combines those two things. He's mysterious. You don't see his face throughout the whole thing. And then he's revealed in the final act as the guy behind everything, and you get his reveal. I when I originally did my list, I had Blofeld, parentheses, Donald Pleasance, but I wanted to go different because Joe already had taken him. I was hoping Joe would go with like Charles Gray from Diamonds Are Forever because he apparently really loved that movie.
It's great.
I think he's awesome in that movie.
I thought about it. If he had the scar in that movie, I would have probably picked him. But it was just too. I think if someone's like not really a Bond fan or just a casual Bond fan, and you showed them a picture of Blofeld from Diamonds Are Forever and asked which character this is, they probably wouldn't know. Where Donald Pleasance Blofeld is like people automatically know who that is.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think that's the most iconic Blowfield. I think that I like the From Russia with Love version because it just embodies like what I would have liked from the character. But yeah, if you're talking Mount Rushmore icons, it's hard to beat Donald Pleasance's Blowfield. I made a whole argument for it already.
Yeah. All right.
And if you make a Mount Rushmore, you want Donald Pleasance's face with that scar. You don't want Telly Savalas with his earlobes taped back, and you don't want just a man in a chair that you can't see. Yeah, just like a cat and hands. So
yeah,
if you're putting a face of Blofeld on it, Donald Pleasance is definitely the face. Yeah. Even though it might not be my favorite Blofeld performance, it's definitely the most iconic looking Blofeld.
All right, so that brings us to deciding between Le Chiffre, Silva, Sanchez, and Zoran.
I think we definitely got to go with more modern version. One of the Craig versions villains. I mean, I think Le Chiffre is a really iconic one, and I think embodies Casino Royale really well. I haven't seen Skyfall. It's one of the only Bond movies I haven't seen yet, so I can't comment on that villain. I'm saving that one for the end because it's like that. I'm potentially gonna do that in Spectre back to back as my finale, so I haven't seen that one just yet. But if I was gonna vote for either one, I'd have to go with Le Chiffre because that's the one that I've seen. But I have on a lot of the lists. I do. Johnny's pick was one of the ones on a lot of the lists, so he has some of the backing of the fans too.
Yeah. Because number one, I feel dirty taking Le Chiffre when Tristan hasn't seen Silva, so it's hard for me to just like accept that victory. So...
I'll say this: I went with Silva because I think he just has a bigger actual villain plot than Le Chiffre does. Le Chiffre is basically there as like the stock market guy, and then he fucks up because Bond stops that plane from crashing and then has to win his money back. So, or they'll kill him. So the only reason my tiebreaker was that, but I think overall I like Le Chiffre as a character more. So I wouldn't have an issue going with Le Chiffre because that's the movie we've all seen, and I love Mads Mikkelsen. He's one of my favorite actors on the planet.
I'll make an argument for the one I haven't seen and say that we have Casino Royale kind of covered multiple times on that list, and we haven't covered Skyfall, which is a pretty acclaimed movie. So that would be the only argument I could think of changing it up because we've covered Daniel Craig's Casino Royale a lot, but we haven't covered much of the other movies.
And I think Silva covers more of like what you want from a Bond villain. He has like the scar kind of, but it's a different type of scar. It's not just like, oh, I have a mark on my face, where Le Chiffre does just have like, oh, I have a scar on the side of my face.
His eye bleeds once in a while.
Yeah, and
that's like his.
And Silva is more of like the over dramatic, kind of put on a performance type of villain that I think you want more from a Bond villain. So I think I'm going to argue against myself and actually flip my vote to Silva.
All right.
Look at that. We
I'm
turned
happy
it
with that.
around.
Joe and I both tried to or I tried to flip mine and then Joe flipped his. But yeah, I think Silva, like I said, like Mads Mikkelsen is great, but it's like kind of meant to be like kind of an underplayed type of guy. And he's more like he's scared for his own life. That's why he's doing it. So he's desperate. Silva, it's like the cocky, evil villain, I think, that you don't get in any of the other Craig movies as much. So, I mean, I like Dominic Green in Quantum, but he's not like super memorable.
He's
and
just
then,
like weird.
We already have
guy.
Blowfield, who is in Spectre, but none of us are picking Christopher or Christoph Waltz's version of that.
He's a great actor, but I don't know.
Because he seems to only do good when he's with Quentin Tarantino.
Yeah, I think he does. Rewatching You Only Live Twice makes me appreciate his performance more in Spectre, because I think he went for the Donald Pleasance kind of downplay, be more of a mellow type of guy. But he's Christoph Waltz. I wanted him to be like the Telly Savalas over the top Blofeld, instead of throwing it back to maybe something that's not in his strengths.
Yeah, I feel like Spectre tried to go more for like the throwback type of Roger Moore-esque kind of movie, and they just didn't tell Christoph Waltz that, so he was going for like the Casino Royale, Quantum of Solace realistic version.
Mm-hmm. I would have liked him to be like, if he was basically just exactly the same as he is in Inglourious Bastards as Blofeld, having really fun with the role, I think that would have been better for his character. All right. But he does get the scar. So at least they gave him the scar.
So that brings us to our final Mount Rushmore of villains. It is Donald Pleasance Blofeld in You Only Live Twice, Goldfinger from Goldfinger. We have Alec Trevelyan from GoldenEye, and Silva from Skyfall.
All right, I like those.
All right.
Choices. Any villains that you guys really like but didn't really have an argument for in Mount Rushmore? Because mine for that is, I love Hugo Drax in Moonraker, but he doesn't belong anywhere near like iconic Bond villains. It's just one of my favorite characters that I want to give a shout out to.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of felt the same way about Green in Quantum of Solace, but he was just like a guy. Like, I liked him in the movie, but as far as like a Mount Rushmore of Bond villains, I'm like, he's just kind of a guy, so I can't really put him on the list.
It was tough for me because it was hard to not like Max Zorin was me, where I was like, okay, I kind of want to get this guy on the list, but I don't necessarily feel like I have an actual argument for him to be like on this list of villains. But you guys had a lot of the big ones covered, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to throw Zorin in. He was on my like honorable mention essentially, because I thought that he would be someone that I couldn't get my way into liking. I wanted to get Christopher Lee from The Man with the Golden Gun on there because it's Christopher Lee, and the villains in that
strong.
Yeah, the villains are so much better than the rest of the movie. Is that like they can't really nominate someone from that movie because the movie around them is just not good.
Yeah, the other like villain that I think you could make an argument for, because we don't get many female villains. I think Electra King is a really good villain in The World Is Not Enough.
Yeah.
But like she kind of shares the role with Renard. Like he's really like a henchman. He's more of just a secondary villain. But I think she's great in that. In what is outside of her, like sometimes an overly ridiculous movie, I think she is like a good, intimidating, and like maniacal kind of villain. So I like her a lot too.
Yeah.
Brosnan had some good villains in his. I mean, outside of Die Another Day.
Yeah.
But even in what's his name in Tomorrow Never Dies, the most over the top acting ever. Like that dude knew. Like we talked about, like Christoph Waltz not knowing what movie he was in. That dude knew for sure what movie
Jeremy
he was
Price,
in. Yeah.
Yeah, my review of that movie with the whole like government, like the control of everything through the media, was I feel like that movie's more relevant now than it was when that movie came out.
Except for the fact that his whole idea is to be the #1 newspaper in the world.
Yeah, that
part of it doesn't. Like if it was, if you go back and change that to like he had like the first idea of social media and this is how he was going to make it big. Yes, but the fact that newspapers were like out in like a few years after that movie came out, and that was like the big Bond villain plot to start World War III so he could get exclusive broadcasting rights in China. That is literally his plot. Like that's insane.
Yeah. All right. So, anything else anyone wants to add?
No, it was a great discussion. I was surprised. We had a lot of crossover in some of the categories, like how do you not have a Blowfield or Goldfinger in your villain list or something. Like some of those are pretty easy to fill in, but we all had our own like personal choices in there too. So it was fun conversation for sure.
Yeah, you guys sure did have your personal choices that reflected in our cold opens.
Yeah. All right. So next week we're continuing James Bond month. We're doing a 24 movie bracket where I think we're gonna seed them based on the Rotten Tomato score, and we're just gonna go through and match them up head to head and eliminate them as we go and figure out, according to us, based on our bracket, what is the best James Bond movie of all time.
It's gonna be ridiculous.
Yeah, it should be. I'm voting for it every time.
Oh my.
I'm excited for it. Hopefully, Bobby will come back from wherever he's gone and will be able to be in it. He's been gone for 2 weeks now, so hopefully he's back.
Yeah, Bobby just hates James Bond.
Yeah,
and he's too ashamed to.
I think that's what we
tell
learned.
us that.
Bobby hates James Bond, and without further ado, goodbye.